Well, welcome this afternoon to another Ford the Rock podcast where we interview Rockford's leaders, we hope. Today we have Mike Dunn with us, who's the Executive Director of R1 Planning Council. And welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Mike is in charge of...
Michael,
I'm sorry. Michael is in charge of, if I make that mistake, it will be several times through the course of the interview. So
people that really know me, it's Michael.
Apologize for it. R1 Planning Council started out as
An MPO, which is a federal acronym for Metropolitan Planning Organization. It was legislation. There's been different reiterations of it, but for the most part, legislation coming out of the 60s that encouraged a planning process across jurisdictional lines. And as every federal transportation bill was passed by Congress, it became more and more prescriptive. So much so that now, if you're a census-defined urbanized area, so what that means is every 10 years when the census comes in, not only do they count, where does everybody live and what's the household demographics, but the census now divides the country up in urbanized area and rural areas. So you're either rural or you're urbanized. And if you have an urbanized area, which Rockford, Belvedere share, of 200,000 people or more, you are federally required to have what is called a metropolitan planning organization.
Oh, so this isn't a choice.
No.
Okay.
And so we have been, since the 2000 census, an urbanized area with Belvedere. The rural kind of disappeared between the two, right? Mm-hmm. And we're over 200,000. So if local government wants access to federal highway funding, you have to have this and you have to participate in it. So it's a federal mandate, but in this case, it's a funded federal mandate.
Okay, so the hook is transportation. So it started out as a transportation.
That's right.
Planning organization. And I quite frankly haven't followed your stuff that much. And I went to this Engage R1, the second page of your website, I think,
Sure.
and was blown away by the number of projects.
Thanks.
So, okay, it started as transportation. What has it become?
Sure. And I mean, I can still do kind of a little bit of a history lesson. We wouldn't be what we are today if not for a lot of the past effort from nonprofits. You led the Element. There's been a lot of heavy attempts to try and coordinate things regionally prior to what we now call as R1. The history of it was we had, and this was under Mayor Larry Morrissey. He led the effort. Chairman Scott Christensen led the effort. As part of this prescriptive requirement, what you do is you have mayors and county chairmen, chair people, sit around the table and meet and say, what binds us together regionally? What is our commonality? What is our economic through line, right? And how do we as a region across cities and counties function? And prior to my arrival, Steve Ernst was running RMAP, which was RATS. That was this transportation planning group, doing a great job. I find myself advocating for exactly what Steve was advocating for 10 years ago. The problem was that traditionally RATS RMAP was part of City Hall. It was part of the Public Works Department at City Hall. Yeah. And then the RADC had created a federal economic development district, which was becoming very big during the Obama administration after the 2008 recovery. And that also was federal, and it had the same kind of mayors and county chairs as board members. And then you had a few other multi-jurisdictional entities where it's not just the city or the county, but it requires, the parks, Loves Park and McChesney Park, to sit at the table. And I think back then, prior to me being hired, Larry and Scott both felt that they were going to too many meetings. And the meetings were good, but they talked to these 3 staff members, they talked to these 4 staff members, and that the staff members weren't talking. Right? That, the county had embedded in it Wingis.
And they're silos.
Yep. The Department of Commerce function, it was just crawling. It was not designated yet, was in the RADC. And we're going to all these meetings. We're talking about transportation in one room. We're talking about economic development in another room. We're talking about land use in this other room. And we get it as elected leaders, but we're frustrated from what I was told by them. We want one kind of, operating system, right? To talk about all these issues that are symbiotic with a staff that's, holistic. And that wasn't happening. So I think smartly, again, before I was hired, I get no credit. This was all kind of in the works prior to my arrival. Was that we got to look at best practice and how other communities are organizing. There was a hints of that with Transform Rockford a little bit, in that this cannot be the right system for Rockford and for the Rockford region. And what they found was a regional planning council was a reaction to this legislation in the 60s. It was a reaction to the regional planning council has been around for 30, 40 years too, but they were then seeing these economic development districts get formed, and they were seeing the economic development district kind of merged with the transportation group.
Okay, what's an economic,
I'll get to that, but the long story short, it was kind of like, okay, there is a best practice. There is a kind of, standard unit of government, whether it's in Kansas City or Seattle or Broward County, Florida, or Portland, Maine. There's a regional planning council. That's kind of, and Illinois state statute calls for regional planning commissions. There, CMAPs in Chicago. There's one in Peoria.
That's right,
there's
yeah.
one in Quad Cities. They're all across Illinois. There's one in Champaign County. Rockford didn't have one. So I think the goal was to merge a lot of these multi-jurisdictional assets where they sat on the boards for all of these. Our elected leaders, the guys and women that we elect, sat on the boards for all these, but we just weren't organized right. And we kind of felt that maybe 15 years ago when TR was coming up, this just doesn't feel right. And so R1 and the Planning Council was our attempt to kind of self-organize, bring in a new governance framework, and get everybody under one roof working for the resident, for the taxpayer. The second side of the coin, the economic development district, the transportation group, what was RATS? I'm throwing a lot out. This is kind of boring, but I mean, if you just want to know what's under the hood, RATS, RMAP, the transportation group's goal is to look out 30 years in the future and be able to give a target to the federal government, to federal elected leadership, that, hey, this is what we need in our transportation network, our transportation system 30 years from now to prepare for where industry's going, where the labor shed is, where people are living, how people are getting to their marketplaces and places of employment, and how people are getting to school and human services. Here are the areas we want to preserve. Here are our greenways. Here are where we do not want transportation expansion. That's all federally required of us. Here's how we are investing equitably in a community, how we're bringing and rising up disadvantaged areas, all federally required. And we're given the money to both plan for it and to implement it. And I think that the economic development district was the other half of that coin, where transportation's 30 years out because it takes that long to build transportation. It's very hard to predict, robo taxis and flying drone deliveries of, goods and autonomous movement. That's hard, but the goal is to plan out 30 years. I think on the other spectrum, there's this function in the U.S. Department of Commerce, very similar to U.S. Department of Transportation, where they want to know, what is your economic development strategy and what are your top public asks from the federal government for infrastructure and to pay for infrastructure, to build out job centers, to build out your industrial clusters, to bring jobs to your region. And that is a thing. That is a thing that Seattle has. It is a thing that Houston has. We have one. Champaign has one. Peoria has one. But the two were not, they were talking, but they weren't operating in a shared planning process. So if you're a hospital CEO, you're going to the transportation meetings, and as a hospital CEO or the mayor telling them, hey, here are my transportation priorities. But then you were going to a different set of meetings, right? And talking about economic development, when the two, especially now, are intertwined. And so the goal was to get those two organizations under one roof at the beginning, and then we can talk about the other stuff we bolted on more and more. And that's, again, the framework nationwide.
But so the core framework for beginning to be a metropolitan planning agency was really the transportation planning and economic development.
Yeah.
And the economic development planning is called SEDS.
That's it. So lots of acronyms. Again, we now are numb to the fact that all this sounds archaic, but SEDS is again nationwide comprehensive economic development strategy.
Okay, so let's just focus on those two for right now, and just what are the areas? I mean, geographically, I think at one point we went up to Rock County, included Rock County. I don't know if it's there anymore. And, what's the regional council of governments?
So it depends on the program, right? Our geography is based on the program that we're managing and administering. So again, that transportation group's interesting because it's every 10 years, right? Your planning area is defined by the census every 10 years. And so it's not even all of Winnebago County. So Beloit has a metropolitan planning organization. They come into South Beloit and they do the planning for the Beloit urbanized area, right? And that is not the Rockford urbanized area. So
wait a minute. So Beloit cuts down into
Winnebago, yeah.
Winnebago.
Yeah.
And we're not going up to Rock County anymore.
I don't think we ever were, unless that was before my time. That might have been when you were at the city.
I think it must have been.
It must have been, yeah. Beloit got their own urbanized area, and we work really well with them. South Beloit sits on our main board here. We just don't do transportation planning in South Beloit. So for many housing, economic development, we love working with South Beloit. But yeah, in transportation, we are beholden to how people are counted in the census. And so the urbanized kind of boundary, which normally you have rural between urbanized areas, in Winnebago County and in, as we approach Chicago, there really isn't a gap of rural. It is urbanized area into one other urbanized area. And so right about Elevator Road, just north of Elevator Road, is where the line comes down as far as what the Rockford urbanized area is. We go down to Byron, so we're into Ogle, and then we have most of Boone County. And so that's the transportation side. Economic development, again, you think this stuff would be easy. On the economic development side, we're McHenry County, the entire counties, McHenry County, Boone County, and Winnebago County.
Wait a minute. So you're planning for economic development in McHenry County,
We are.
which I generally associate as an far outlying county suburb of Chicago.
So this discussion is supposed to make things sound simple. It's actually even more like it is. Our geographic area is based on the program. So McHenry County, the city of Chicago does McHenry County's MPO transportation planning. McHenry is one of the 7 counties in what we call CMAP, which is why we used to be called RMAP, right? Rockford Metropolitan Agency for Planning. They have the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. McHenry County, just like Beloit has their own, McHenry County is in Chicago's transportation group. We do economic development support for McHenry County, and we do housing, land bank. McHenry's in our land bank. So, yeah, it really depends on the program.
So what you really are is a broadly based, agile organization that responds to whatever the program says. That's it. And it could be the 3 counties, Winnebago, McHenry, and Boone. Or it could be, we don't go all the way to Wisconsin, but Wisconsin comes down to us. Yeah. Or do we have Freeport and Stevenson
Freeport
County?
and Stevenson sit on our board for a host of things, just not for the 2 programs we talked. There are some programs where it's a coalition of the willing. Mayor McNamara, I shouldn't get that name wrong. Mayor McNamara is 3 times now been elected as the chair of our Council of Government program. Remarkable that we have so many members of it, and they keep looking at the city of Rockford and the Rockford mayor, and he deserves it, as the leader of the region. That's a coalition of the willing. There's no geographic boundary. If you want to be part of it,
who's on that?
You name it. Like we have villages and cities and counties of like Ogle, Stevenson. McHenry has their own council of government, so not McHenry. Poplar Grove just joined. Boone. You have so
that's whoever wants to join this.
And that's more about what our legislative priorities are and stuff like that. But Village of Winnebago, right, things like that. So there's some of these programs require you to be of a certain size, right? The economic development, it's by the county. Cities don't get a choice, right? There's lots of archaic bureaucratic rules to all this stuff, but we do our best with it to make it feel like it's one entity, which it's Region 1, right? We're governed by a board of mayors and county chairs. As staff, as leaders our leadership team's about 6 staff members. As leaders, we're trying to make the same thing look and feel seamless to everyone. But yeah, it's a lot of juggling of all these different rules and geographies.
All right. What was the group you just talked about? Or just of the willing?
Yeah. So we land bank for housing. That's coalition of the willing a little bit. The Council of Government certainly is. The Council of Government is a group. Think of it as like an association almost, where mayors or county leaders can get around the table and talk about, again, what is our regional wish list and priority list for policy and for funding down in Springfield at our state capitol. Sometimes it gets into federal. Most of it is state level based. We work with our state delegation. We host a Christmas lunch every Christmas where the entire state delegation of state reps and state senators come in, and Mayor McNamara's chair of the COG, leads a discussion on, hey, what got done this year? What do we need to look at in the year ahead, in the upcoming calendar year? It's a membership group of elected leaders trying to figure out how do we lock arms on some of these issues when, not saying anything we don't know is Rockford's a big metro area of Illinois, but we're still considered a downstate community, right? And you dealt with that when you were at City Hall, right?
Downstate. I bought a T-shirt from Mid-Cities or whatever. I can't remember. The Urban Outfitters guys that said upstate Illinois. They had a sweatshirt once. I saw it and I had to buy it. Upstate Illinois. That's what we are. But anyway, yeah.
So how did all this function when you were at City Hall?
Well, it was the City County Planning Commission was really the start, and that was knocked out back in '78, wiped that out. And then we started, and there was also a Regional Planning Council. And it leads to one of my questions, which I'd rather have you answer. When I was doing it, which was ages ago, planning was not a favorite topic of the community. I mean, just in general. We did work on getting rid of the City County Planning Commission because of the divide between city policies and the county policies, which is a very broad divide at that point. But it seems to me that either you're just quiet enough that you're really not known. I dare anybody, you can email or write on our Facebook page or something, questions. But if you know any of these programs, write. But how did you get quiet, or how did you get to the?
Well, that's an easy one. I want to get back. I want to understand, so why did these things go away? I'm not saying you got rid of them, but when you were at City Hall, what was the reason for them? It was like, well, quite frankly, it was like today's national isolationism.
We wanted to take care of Rockford, and we just didn't see. The connections just weren't there politically as much as anything. It was a strongly Republican county board and an increasingly Democratic city council, and we just didn't have the same priorities.
Yeah, and that there's still like a hangover from that even. Less so today, but even when I started this job, it was clear, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just, the city and county didn't get along at all. I think it really depends as much on the two leaders, the mayor and the county board chairman, to what extent they do even begin to get along. If you get two individuals who are antithesis, they don't get along.
My first year at RMAP, which is now R1, Region 1, I was fortunate enough to learn a lot and work for Sunil Puri and work at First Rockford prior to getting this job. And so we knew about jurisdictional lines. We understood what a development deal in one city versus the other meant. And Sunil is a master at that. But it was really foreign to me what you just described. Like, it just was bad for business as far as coming from the private sector. And in my first year, I watched the regional planning kind of commission for Boone and Belvedere dissolve. And that was just like, That's one of the smallest landmass counties, I think the smallest landmass county in Illinois, right? County of 50,000 people. And even then, it dissolved.
No, urban rural, I mean, part of it is historically people, it's part of Rockford's innate negativism of the people who grew up here, and it just gets passed on. But people who moved out of Rockford, there was that one zone that was out by Guilford and out by Montecito Country Club that was unincorporated. My brother lived in an unincorporated area that got annexed.
Oh, jeez.
And we got a phone call.
Let me turn off the ringer.
So, but people were very proud of the fact that they don't live in the city of Rockford. They're very happy about it.
You don't think that's changed?
I don't know. Has it?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I can brag about our staff. The staff that we've brought in, they love, for the most part, I mean, I can't speak for them. They love working for Rockford and the region and coming to work downtown Rockford. And they have a sense of civic pride that I don't see with people that were born and raised here.
Well, yeah. But these are people who moved here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's true. I think we had another guest on a while ago that we talked fairly long about the fact that the people who really love Rockford or like Rockford, usually people who moved here. And they're really surprised that for them getting around is very easy. Accessibility is tremendous, especially if they happen to live on the east side. You know, in their mind, they've got all the shopping they need, the sports courts right there, walking paths, et cetera, et cetera. You know, everything's there. And it's all within a 10-minute drive. So what's not to like? If you've been beat up in Chicago, you know, most of these people are coming from major metropolitan areas. They've been beat up with an hour-long commute, and their commute all of a sudden becomes 10 minutes or 20 minutes, 10 minutes on a country road and 10 minutes on Alpine or Prairieville. You know, what's not to like?
Yeah, for sure. No, we moved our family back here. I think when you're in that phase of building your family, it's extremely attractive to be here. You know, there's things I get, and there's things, even as somebody who was raised here, I still don't necessarily understand the logic of. But I was just curious that, you know, you've seen it all, having been in city government. What do you think of what we're doing right now?
Well, I was very impressed. I'm very impressed by your reach, the reach of the organization, and the fact you've consolidated all these separate entities. It reminds me of the consolidation we did of city government, and which I think we talked about on the last podcast, or maybe the one before. But I think that's very impressive. And the other thing about it is the more you make it work, you develop you develop expertise, and that expertise gets cross-pollinated. And that's one of those things that doesn't happen when everybody's in a silo.
Yeah, I need you to come into the office and share that.
You know, really, and that's really one of the best things that can happen.
Yeah.
When I was running the community development department for the city, the first thing I did was force everybody together. All the leadership of the various divisions and things. You know, you had to start having weekly staff meetings, and you know they soon deteriorated to staff over here and department heads over there. But it was forcing pollination, and that's really one of the best things because expertise learns from other expertise.
We've built the organization up to about 57 people.
Good God. Really?
Yeah, and it's not bloated. Nothing's being paid from local tax money or anything like that.
Let's talk about that a second.
But I owe you another answer, though, and that's what I guess I'd point to is that, you know, it all starts with our board. And you said, you know, why is things so quiet? One of my mentors early on when I was still in the private sector was a guy in Rochelle who handled economic development for Rochelle, and his name was Jason Anderson. He just retired about a year ago. And he really was a heck of a sales guy, heck of an economic development guy for Rochelle, and built Rochelle into an industrial powerhouse. And he would say that the people that came before him did. And one of the things he told me was like, let your board, let the elected leadership shine. And we try, we do our best, right? Let them represent stuff. And I think that we try to stay in the background and be that technical support consultancy, that kind of G to G consultant for local government, right? Our goal is to get, more federal money, more state money, more grant wins for the city of Rockford, for the county of Winnebago, for the parks. Our job is to not really be out there as another entity circulating either in Rockford or somewhere else trying to grab headlines. Every now and then we're asked for a quote. Every now and then we want to make our employees proud of where they work. So it's a delicate balance, right? You want to be an entity that people understand, an entity that people are familiar with, aren't threatened by or anything like that. And make sure the staff feels fulfilled, make sure the staff feels recognized in the community, while balancing the fact that we don't implement anything, right? We're only as good as the cities and counties around us. And so it's a balance. What I really like about our board is, I gave kudos to Mayor McNamara. He deserves every, kudo he gets. He's leading our council of government, but he's been a leader in discussions with the federal delegation. I mean, he really has shown the ability to think regionally, and I think that comes with multiple terms.
Right.
He's in his third term, but what's remarkable is Chairman Shirelli is Region 1 Planning Council's Board of Directors Vice Chair. And Mayor Jury of Loves Park is Region 1 Planning Council's Chairman, and he's been elected several times as Chairman of the board. You have this, and then Mayor Morris is a great, partner when it comes to crossing county lines and city lines. I don't think of myself as a Rockford organization. I think of R1 as a multi-county organization, but because we're physically in downtown Rockford, I think people do think of us as a Rockford organization. So to have people from Ogle, Stevenson, Boone come in and be equals at the table, I think that's part of our success. That we're not just a Rockford organization, but you have a Democrat mayor of Rockford, a Republican county chair, a Republican mayor in one city, a Democrat mayor in another, all working around the table. And regardless of what's happening in headlines, regardless of economic competitions for who's getting that fast food restaurant or whatever it is, right? All of that stops, and everybody, when they at least come to our agency, really is trying to do what's best for the agency, for our mission, for our mandate, and then really think as regional partners. That I didn't necessarily have day one when I started the job. And that's not because of me. That's because of who we're electing, right? It's the ballot box. The people that are elected in these local government positions right now, I'm on my fourth version of the Region 1 board, the best collaboration I've ever seen.
Well, that is fantastic. And the fact that they don't bring too much of their bias, their localized bias, to meetings is really remarkable. But it also begs the question of how much implementation do you do? What do you really put in the ground? I mean, the land bank, if I'm understanding, that's something you're putting in the ground.
Yeah.
But is there anything else? I mean, do you put roads in the ground?
No, we fund them.
We fund them, though.
Yeah. And so it's tricky, right? Different programs call for different degrees of, impact. So MPOs nationwide, the Transportation Planning Group nationwide, have come in many different flavors as far as how engaged and how much do they implement. The San Diego version of what we do, they own the toll road to Coronado Island. They collect a toll because they built it, right? So they bonded it, and they collect the toll. We have MPOs that are maybe east of us, but still Midwest, that do water permitting, right? And that's why I'm interested a little bit in your history, Ed. It's just that every time I hear about what does a transportation planning group do other than transportation planning, there's always a backstory that, well, we had the right elected leadership and they wanted to consolidate, and we were a trustworthy entity to consolidate into. We were governed by them. So we have all of our guys going into the field for the highway department, right? Stuff like that. And it's typically always a function of the past. It's nothing that's relatively recently adopted, but it always played to that region's need and that region's ability to collaborate kindly. And so for us on the transportation planning side, we're pretty traditional. We don't have that. There was maybe because of what you just described as city and county not getting along for decades. We don't have that on the transportation side. We do our planning, and every planner would like to tell you that they want to play a role in the implementation of their own work. And that's a struggle sometimes to put together, especially a special study area, get it there, and then hand it off to someone else and say, okay, now do it. Having zero faith in will they be able to get it implemented. We do have two sources of funding that comes to us from the federal government that is for construction, and that is the design theory of, if you follow this plan, if you follow our planning, you'll be, rewarded with construction dollars. So we have two pots of money that pay for construction that our board, assigns or appropriates. So we have road money, and that road money in the past has gone to Harrison and Rockford. It's gone to
which was much needed, by the way.
Yeah, it went to the Bell School East State Street intersection and that redesign. And it's gone to smaller projects throughout the region that were just more tactical. And then we have, in fairness, I don't want to say too much, but recently it's gone to the Winnebago County Highway Department towards the overall project cost. It doesn't cover the whole cost, but it's helping set the table to fund basically reconstructing Riverside from the train tracks at Material, right, to Sage, so around the Forest Hills Alpine area. And so we've financially contributed to that as well. And then we have a second source of funding.
Wait a minute, cover that again, from the train tracks?
So if you know Material Avenue in Loves Park, so just west of where the Kmart used to be on East Riverside.
East Riverside.
Yeah, west of Forest Hills Road.
West of Forest Hills.
Yep.
Okay.
So there's that's the Canadian, or no, that's the Union Pacific. So the Union Pacific crosses the East Riverside.
Is that by where the Sand Park Pool?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I should have used Sand Park Pool. Sorry.
Right.
So east of Sand Park Pool, to redo East Riverside, that's a county road. That's one of our favorite projects because it affects more than one jurisdiction, right?
Right.
You got City of Loves Park on one side, City of Rockford on the other, but the county actually owns what's called the facility or the road, right? So the county's responsible for Riverside Boulevard, that part of Riverside Boulevard. And so we're very proud that because through the planning process and all that, we've been able to contribute millions of dollars to Winnebago County in construction dollars, right, to help cover the overall cost of improving that section of East Riverside. That'll go all the way east to about Sage, which is like, do you remember where like the Sunoco pool, that area is?
Right.
Yeah, right. So east of Burger King. And so those are two major intersections. And then IDOT, the Illinois DOT has a piece of the Alpine Riverside intersection, and Loves Park's north of there. And so, yeah, that's a complicated project. And through the planning process, we were able to then have our board, not us as staff, come in and fund Winnebago County's reconstruction. The other source of money that we have is for bike path, for multi-use path, for sidewalk. And so that's awarded every year too. So as we don't just do, vehicle transportation, we look again, as I said, greenway planning, alternative transportation planning, bicycle. We're very proud of all the work we've done, bicycle and pedestrian, we call bike ped planning. And so we have lined up funding. We helped fund the shared use path that goes on North Alpine between Harlem and 173. We have funded the path that was put in for Parkview between the College of Medicine and Anderson Gardens. So there's different pieces that you'll see. We helped with the Rails to Trails Bridge over the Rock River. And so those are two sources of federal money that it's the closest I think our planners get to implementing, right? If you follow the planning that's been done, the board of mayors and chairs will, distribute that construction dollar.
Well, first of all, I've got an answer for your one question you asked. Part of the divide that occurred, and I just realized this now as you were talking, part of the reason the agencies fell in disfavor in the late 70s, 80s was they were staff, and the staff was leading them. They had private sector, private entrepreneurs, whatever, bank presidents, that type of person was doing it. It wasn't elected officials. It was private businessmen. And in this particular area, you really need the elected officials.
100%.
So that was really, and so the staff could stand up at a public meeting and say, the executive director of what was the Tri-County Planning Commission or whatever it was called, which included Rock County, could stand up and tell everybody to go screw themselves. But, you're not going to have, the mayor's not going to do that. You wouldn't be in a position. You'd be putting the mayor up there.
Yeah.
But there the staff did it. And that's partly what pissed us all off.
Yeah, I totally see that.
Right? So a major success of this operation is getting the elected officials together and having them on the same page.
Yeah.
Which is quite remarkable, quite frankly.
I'm blessed. I hear horror stories at these other planning councils that I say are the best practice, right? You hear horror stories of some of the fighting that goes on the board level with the elected leadership, that where the national discussion enters into that regional discussion unfairly. When you talk about business leaders and the planning that's been done, downtown Rockford, one of the most interesting stories I've heard, and we as an agency have tried to react to, is, and we did this with a grant that we supported the city of Rockford. Actually, we supported IDOT, the state DOT, on because it's their roads and they were a good partner, but it really benefits the city of Rockford and downtown Rockford. Is we wrote one of the biggest grants you can. It was at one point called Tiger, and every time a president got elected, they changed the name. I don't even know what it's called right now. It might be called Go Back to Build, but then it was called Tiger, then it was called Build, then it was called Raise. I don't think it's going to be called Raise anymore, but it's a huge grant, $25 million max, which is a huge number for a federal grant. And we supported IDOT and supported the city in trying to figure out what do we do with Jefferson and Chestnut in downtown Rockford. Right?
2 one-ways.
Yeah. And the theory was a lot of people like to convert one-ways to two-ways. And I would argue, and I'm not a planner, but I would argue that not every one-way should be converted. Some should, 6th and 9th. Those are good conversions, right? But not everyone should be. We went to really smart people. It wasn't just my opinion as a motorist, that very smart people said, no, Jefferson and Chestnut are working well. They're the DOT's roads. They're IDOT's roads. IDOT doesn't want to convert them. So how do we make them function better for our downtown, while keeping them one way? And so the thought was keep them the split pairs, right? One goes in one direction, one goes in the other. Add Walnut into it. You got a loop from Swedish American down to past the jail. And they function well. And we wrote this grant. We got the grant. You're going to start seeing improvements first on Chestnut and Walnut. But hey, we need to create an off-street protected bi-directional multi-use lane for bikes and pedestrians. That's going to come. We need to create areas for RMTD buses to turn off safely and not stall traffic. And we need to psychologically connect the east bank and the west bank of the river, right? There's some psychological barrier, not for me, but I think for a lot of people, where if they're out enjoying a Friday or Saturday night, especially in bad weather, do they really want to cross the river to get to that next restaurant or go get, that next, if they're at the Ice Hogs game, do they want to cross the river or are they just going to stay on the west side? So how do we create like some, almost a greenscape across both bridges to make it feel not just on a city market night, but year round, more walkable, right? Visually it looks far away, but step count it's not. And so A lot of thought went into the design, and parallel parking in front of storefronts was another concern, where the state owned the road, but the city owned the parallel parking. So they were on two different construction schedules as far as when the blacktop was, repaired. And so I think you'll see the first kind of attempt at this happen with Chestnut and Walnut. What is modern parking along that arterial? How does it function safely for bicyclists and motorists? But how do we keep it one way so traffic still flows? The reason why I bring that up is I was told that the problem, one of the, when I was asking Steve Ernst, asking these people, like, what happened to downtown in addition to Cherryville Mall or all that? Like, what really happened? And what I was told was that the business leaders, our city fathers at the time, really didn't care about downtown. We had a bunch of factories on our river. Our downtown was not the amenity downtown that it might be today. It was factories, right? You had Ingersoll, and you had Barbara Coleman, you had Amrock, and you had Tapco, and right, you had these factories, and the city fathers really didn't care about anything but how many vehicles could they get in at peak rush for commuting. How can the workers get to the factories the fastest and then go home, right? And how did raw materials or other products come in on a freight system in and out of downtown? So the thought was supporting the industrial that was in our downtown versus having a strong integrated downtown. And that was also the underpinnings for our ask of federal money for Chestnut. And what's interesting to me, and I've said it a couple times, is that whether we like it or not, whether it was COVID or not, our downtown is fundamentally changing from a daytime population to a nighttime population. And what I mean by that is, talk to some lawyers that are used to going to the courthouse every day, right? Well, a lot of their appearances are now over Zoom, right? It's efficient, right? They don't have to leave their law office, but you don't have the daytime population of some of the companies that were down here 10 years ago, right? Some of the banks that were down here, some of the law firms that were down here. A lot of the daytime population has either moved to another area of our region, or it just doesn't exist, or it's working from home. But what we are seeing, thanks to some developers, is a shift to residential, right? Less commercial and more residential. And that's very intriguing to me, and I think it's intriguing to the staff that I represent, in how does our transportation not only recover from building a 4-lane cross-section on Jefferson, right, and having all this infrastructure to support industry on our river, to shifting 20 years too late to a commercial area with amenities, to this now shift over the last couple of years to you're probably having a larger nighttime population downtown than you are a daytime population. And so, we're proud to be a large employer downtown, the Park District, the county courthouse. There's not many of us.
No,
and so, but there are more and more people choosing to live down here. And so that's, I think, as we try to credibly speak to talking about 30 years of planning, 30 years ahead, what does a nighttime population need to get around and move around versus a daytime? And that's typically pedestrian friendly.
Well, that's a worthwhile question, but going back to your industrial scenario, that was really toast in the late 50s into that transition
when a lot of this was built.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Ernst, talking about Steve Ernst, who was the head of the RMAP, he once gave us a speech on where the north-south Whitman, which is getting changed.
Yeah.
But it was built in order to cover all the people going south to the industrial base in the southeast portion of Rockford, driving from the north. And they went back and forth. And hell, you still see it today.
Yep.
But, we're an industrial city. That's how we developed, what we developed from.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because Ernst would tell me the stories of the Woodruff, and Chuck Sweeney, right, would always, wax poetic about, we missed out on the Woodruff Expressway. We have little bits and pieces of it still today, following the rail right away. And it's interesting to me if I challenge, a lot of our staff is under 30, and I like that. We get a lot of people straight out of their master's program. I challenge them, like, if we had the Woodruff Expressway, would that be a good thing today? Right? My generation was told that would have been a very good thing to connect I-39 with US 20 up into Whitman, and now like Peoria and other Illinois communities, we have interstate access in our downtown. We should have never let I-90 go where it went. That's what I was raised believing.
Right.
But now if you ask the current generation, would Woodruff further disconnecting neighborhoods, right? Dividing neighborhoods.
Would have gone right through
Yeah.
any number of neighborhoods and ripped them apart.
Would that have been a good thing? And it's kind of funny watching, the back and forth on, no, that would have been a horrible thing. Thank God we don't have it. So, should our downtown have access to the interstate? I don't know. I think South Main works really well.
South Main works well. Just going out Harrison now works well.
Yeah.
Let me see what else we got for you. I remember, you talked a couple times about, public engagement.
Yeah.
So how do you guys and when do you create public engagement and where in your process?
So again, as I rattled off at the beginning of the discussion, federal requirements, federal mandates, all that, we can't do anything without showing like not just showing that we did public participation, but cataloging any comment we receive. And any comment we receive in public participation, we're required to add to the report, even if the public comment disagrees with the report. So that was an interesting thing I learned when I first got there, was that regardless of what the comment is, it's going in the report, right? And I just don't think we take advantage of that. I don't think people even notice it, frankly. But we've tried to figure out the most creative ways to engage the public, to get stakeholder feedback. We have staff going to the Boone County Fair, right? Staff's going to be out at the Boone County Fair. We do everything we can to bring it to the neighborhood, bring it to community groups, bring it to community events. And because we are required, we have to show that we were able to put all this out before it was finalized, before it was fait accompli, before it's presented to the board for adoption, and get feedback on it. We are trying videos. We're trying to engage people. Like you gave us a nice compliment about Engage R1. We're trying to put it in the kind of media presentation or disseminated in a digestible way where we could provoke that feedback. We started a community advisory forum to have people that are not elected come in and get previews to some of the work and give us their feedback in a in-person meeting setting, and to get the word out. It's a mutually beneficial kind of group. It is the hardest part of being a planner. Again, I give lots of deference to any planner, whether you're at R1 or you're at a city or a county. It is a hard thing to do. You think you're doing what's right. You roll it out to the public. You're expecting, I'm sure, accolades, but and then you get no response, right?
Yeah.
And that's the trick. So we're federally required to do it. We have to kind of show our work, so to speak. The board, before they adopt it, sees the feedback that comes in.
Okay, where do you post that there is a public meeting, or how do you?
All on the website. We have the Facebook feed, right? We do all the standard stuff.
Social media.
Yep. We're subject to OMA and FOIA, all that. And, before the board adopts it, the report is published. The draft report is published on the website. If you're on the email, you can always add your email, right? Anybody on the email list gets an alert that, hey, this report's up for public viewing prior to adoption.
Okay. So, and your website's easy. It's just R1 Planning or something.
.org, yeah.
Huh?
Then letter R, the number one, planning.org.
.org. The other, what was the other thing I was thinking? Oh, how do you guys interface? I'm sure other cities do CIPs too, but
yeah,
the city of Rockford I'm familiar with. It's been ongoing now for 20 years. And how do you impact the capital improvements program of the city of Rockford?
So,
and Lost Park or Majestic Park for that matter.
No, they all have good ones. So the board and I have at least operated our entity for the last decade, saying that we're not allowed, well, the board is. R1 and its staff are not elected to anything, right? And so we have approached CIPs with the attitude that the people that we all elect at the ballot box should determine how that tax money is spent. Our job is to help find additional money, whether it's through grants, through those funding streams I talked to you about, and help let that CIP dollar go that much further, right? If I can get federal money for Chestnut and Walnut, that's, even though it's IDOT's road, it's less money that has to be spent by the state or local government. If we come in and do Harrison, less money for this that the CIP has to spend. So in our kind of mentality, we have said everybody gives us what your final CIP is, and that's how we will build out what the budget for the next 30 years of transportation planning looks like, right? We at least know the next 5. And that helps us further identify the gaps that are there because the CIPs right now are not including them. So then we can focus on those gaps. We're not about to tell a city or a county what should be in their CIP.
So you don't
no
second guess or criticize or
No.
offer opinions or anything.
And that's why when you were like, hey, I talked about Jason and Rochelle, I learned early on that, I'm not elected to anything. I serve at the pleasure of Chairman Shirelli, Mayor Jury, and the rest of the board. Our job is to be that G2G consultant, right? Local taxpayers, you're paying for it through your federal income tax and your federal motor fuels tax, but most of my budget's federal, right? If I don't get it, somebody else, somewhere else in the country is getting it. We're trying to get our fair share back to Northern Illinois. And so my job isn't to come in and be a traffic cop or a babysitter to local decision making. My job is to support it and show value when I'm asked to.
Well, I'm just reminded of, I went on a trip. It was back when I was at the Park District, but regional planning was part of the trip and best practices. And we went to 3 cities. One of them was Boise, Idaho.
That's awesome.
And they formed a bi-county.
Yep, it's called Compass. I know those guys.
And it came into being because they had a city and a county, and the city had a major highway going one way, and it was supposed to connect with the county, and they missed by 20 feet. So a major highway was like the bypass missing by 20 feet, north and south or whatever. And that's when they decided, this isn't working. So how do you guys ensure that doesn't happen? Because you have you just talked about Alpine and Riverside and whatever. What's your model? You're seeing it all.
So believe it or not, there was an I can't get into it. There was an expansion project brought up of something that was new. And some people on the board liked it. Some people on the board thought it would never happen. This was years ago too. Nothing was recent. And we've avoided a lot of those discussions, right or wrong, because nobody's really planning an expansion project, right? When I got this job 10 years ago, the planners on staff said, well, the Illinois DOT has been talking about replacing the Harrison US 20 interchange with a diverging diamond, but they've been talking about it for 10 years. That was 10 years ago.
Right.
So it's 20 years in the making, right? It's finally happening. And we welcome that investment. There's not really, other than maybe a couple things that might occur in the Lyford corridor, there's not really any expansion projects that are being planned or discussed because of population, because of a focus on infill. And so I don't think we're going to run into that problem. But yeah, the mechanism for my agencies there to talk about expansion project A and expansion project B and how do they perform, how do they function together, and so we have a model in-house called a travel demand model, where if you say we close something, we're going to close this road for construction, what does that do with traffic flow? Like, where does the traffic divert to, right?
Like Whitman Street's getting closed down.
Yeah, that's
closed down today, I think.
Yeah. And so, when the model's used, like, what does that do? What are the impacts, and how do we plan for it? That travel demand model can look at peak volume, congestion at some of our intersections that are tough, like Spring Creek and Alpine and East State Street, right? And it can predict that if you add this expansion, this congestion relief, what will happen, right? That's a tool available to all of our members. But it's interesting to me that I know most of the MPOs that are of large size. I know most of their executive directors at this point. The ones out west seem to function better across those county and city lines than the ones out east, right? So when you talk about Boise, Salt Lake City's a really good one, right? It's some of these newer areas that have just seen population spikes. They kind of had, a game plan on this regional planning as far as how do they work together and how do they accommodate, huge spikes to population growth.
Well, some of them are having those huge spikes.
But Maricopa County, for instance, in Phoenix, they've been doing regional planning since the late 50s. And they really, now people will argue that their interstate expansion has created more sprawl, right? But they, created a giant loop, and they really had no interstate presence from what I was told and what I understand back in the 50s to now. And they at least accommodated, a tremendous amount of population growth. So it just seems like the ones out west figured out regional planning when they were very small, and it's benefiting them today.
Well, we also may get growth finally from people moving back, but that's another topic.
You want to talk about housing? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, there was a lot of talk about the train.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it stopped. And I don't know what's going on with the train. Do you know what's going on with the train?
I do, and I can publicly speak to it to a degree. So it's really funny, right? Because known Steve Ernst most of my life, never thought I would have the good fortune and the blessing to replace him in this role. I moved back to town with my family, as somebody who grew up here, back at the end of 2006. And one of the first organizations I joined was Next Rockford. And that was kind of like Next Rockford in its heyday, right? Not that anything taken away from it now, but it was pre-Transform Rockford, and every company, everybody sent somebody to Next Rockford. And one of my first meetings as a Next Rockford member was Einar Forsman and Steve Ernst with this big banner, I still remember it, telling us all about the train and how we were going to get the train. And I continue to be, I'm pro-train, put it out there. I'm all for the train. I'm not being negative, but about how much people are passionate about this train, right?
Yeah, I'm just curious because it was it was pretty loud, and then it just went dead silent.
Yeah, it's from what IDOT is sharing with us. IDOT's the lead on it. It's IDOT funding. Senator Stottleman deserves a tremendous amount of credit and a huge shout out for. In May of 2019, Senator Stottleman was able to secure the funding for it in 2019 dollars, but was able to secure it. IDOT has had to work on engineering. IDOT has had to work on agreements with the Union Pacific, which is the rail line that will be servicing the train. And then in a very creative, innovative way, and kudos to the state DOT, conventional wisdom, going back to that Next Rockford meeting, they were going to call it the Black Hawk Express again because this was an old Amtrak. Now, it wasn't on the UP, it was on the Canadian National. But, when I was growing up as a little kid, very little, not that old, but they had the Black Hawk, right? Serving Rockford, Chicago. It's a Black Hawk line. And so where IDOT, I think, was super innovative and really decided to buck conventional wisdom is they decided instead of to go with Amtrak, they went with Metra. And I think the success of that line is going to be because they partnered with Metra and will be part of the Metra network. We're not going to be part of the RTA. We're not going to be part of, a typical commuter service that Metra runs now in Metro Chicago. But, you'll be able to step off the platform at 31 in Elgin and connect to Pace, connect to any other Metra service, right? You should have a completely integrated, fair app, right, with Metra. I think there's value there. I think the way Metra runs things it brings value. Their rolling stock, the staffing, just the operations of Metra, I think, is a huge benefit to the Rockford service, and I think people will appreciate it. And I think the line will be more sustainable. My personal opinion, this is not the position of R1, the elected leaders, the staff, or IDOT, is, getting the train going is only half of the challenge. you have to keep the service sustainable, and you need the state of Illinois to continue giving its operating subsidy. The train is not going to break even, right? It will require a operating subsidy from the state of Illinois. And I think part of the sustainable operations for it is that everybody in Elgin wins. Nobody ever talks about that. If you're in Elgin, you were end of the line Metra, right? You might be able to catch an express train, but even that express train is going to have 2 or 3 stops. A lot of the trains are local. Now, if you get on our train, you're nonstop to Northwest Station. It was going to be Union Station. It's going to be Northwest Station more than likely.
Which is where?
Immediately next door to Union Station. It's 1 block difference, right? 2 block difference.
So that's downtown
it's
Chicago.
Still on Canal in the west side of the loop. But if you're somebody in Elgin, you're going to pay a little bit more, but you got a nonstop train to downtown. If you can time it right, and a nonstop train home. So I think the Elgin ridership, I think people underestimate that the Elgin ridership will help keep the operation sustainable. I think you're going to get a surprisingly high ridership in Belvedere. And the hope is to have, ridership between Rockford, Belvedere, and Elgin, right? To the degree that it makes sense. But, from what IDOT's willing to share, they want to start service the later half of 2027. And that means most of 2026, you're going to see a lot of construction if the timetable holds. So it's probably good that you're not hearing a lot about it, because it means people are actually working versus talking.
People are really working instead of arguing.
Yeah.
Right.
So, just even as of last week, we're getting a lot of positive signals out of IDOT as far as the health of the project and getting to the proverbial finish line.
Now, is it totally IDOT funded? Is it state funded, or?
Yeah. No, I mean, other than us paying fares,
the
fare box is not going to cover it. And so, Metro's got an operating contract with IDOT. There's another contract with the Union Pacific because it's Union Pacific's rail. So you got a lot of different entities there that IDOT's, coordinating with. But, Senator Stottleman gave the capital dollars to get this all done. There will be, IDOT subsidizes other Amtrak routes, so it's not out of the ordinary. But until ridership, I don't know the numbers, but ridership and the fare box will never cover 100% of the operation.
Okay, so the train is still alive. It's destined to be downtown.
It'll be a really good thing. What my agency, and if you want to get in the land bank, what we're focused on, and we wouldn't do it without Mayor McNamara and the city administrator, Todd Cagnone's leadership, is, anybody can, R1, City of Rockford's not going to build a train in Chicago. That's a state of Illinois project. But we have a downtown here, and I just kind of, was lecturing about a nighttime population. What are we going to do to profit and benefit off a train coming into our downtown? And I think transit-oriented development mindset with multifamily, mixed-use development around that rail station is kind of what, again, is intriguing to me and things that we're going to try to play a role with.
Well, I think that's logical to start looking at that now. Especially if it's taken care of. Now, getting close to wrap-up time here, I always like to ask people, what are like 2 or 3 things that are your favorite things about Rockford? The Rockford region, whether it be restaurants or a restaurant in particular, or a park or forest preserves, or.
Normally I give a safe answer. First of all,
I don't know if you can give a safe answer.
I can't. It's not in me. I'm not wired to give a safe answer or a stock answer. I will say, and I don't mean to go long, very proud of our planning. We are the second largest metropolitan planning organization in the state. Very proud of what we do and our staff, and they don't get enough credit because they're kind of behind the scenes. But I'd be remiss not to also highlight the work that a lot of our staff does for the Winnebago County mental health sales tax, and the amount of work that they put behind local tax money, almost $20 million a year of sales tax dollars that we all pay, how that goes to build out capacity, especially for juvenile mental health, but for all capacity for mental health services.
So, why don't we talk about that for just a second? How did you guys get into mental health?
So that was something where right around COVID, we're not the only county that does it, There's over 7 or 8 counties in the state that does it. McHenry County does it. And they run a mental health. Most counties take it off your property tax, right? Here, nobody had the appetite for another, property tax levy, so they made it a sales tax, and now we're watching counties in Illinois leave the property tax and follow Winnebago County's lead in going with the sales tax. But I think by then in 2020, it was 2020, had enough of a track record in this new governance framework, in this new operating model to be Switzerland, at least we try to be, and to be a place where we can quickly scale up staff, right? And, they are free to hit the ground running. We did that with the land bank, and we've done that with the mental health sales tax. And the board that was appointed by the county, led by Mariana Body and Dick Kuhnert, looked at Region 1 and Jason Holcomb as, hey, we can use you guys to not be in charge of the sales tax, a board that's appointed by Winnebago County is, but to operate it, right? We don't need to have a full-time executive director. We don't need to have our own building, our own copier contract, because that would be a waste of the sales tax money. But we can use the data experience and the grant-making experience that R1 already has on the transportation side, on the economic development side. We have the methodology set up. We have the process set up. We have the policies in place. What if we brought in subject matter experts on, social work and mental health to come in and support that board with how the board wants to run it? And we did, and Jason's hit it out of the park, so much so that out of every county mental health board in the state, we have the lowest admin costs in the state. And that's cool. Because it isn't its own entity, right? It doesn't have full-time staff. It has staff that are called online when they're needed. And so I would be remiss not to give them a shout out, because R1 is not what RMAP was. As much as Steve did a great job and handed me an awesome MPO, we're not that, right?
No, not even close.
And so that's a really cool area of our agency that is constantly making an impact in our local community. And then the other is Eric Setter. He deserves a huge shout out, and now he's got a staff, a great staff, in not just performing the land bank, but supporting Winnebago and Boone County in what's called their trustee programs. Trustee program being where properties that even a tax buyer won't buy at a tax sale, by default somebody has to own them, so they go into a county trust. And the county's a trustee for them on behalf of all the taxing districts that are owed the back taxes. And Eric operates both those trustee programs as well as a land bank that you were like, wow, McHenry. The land bank is Lake, McHenry, Boone, Winnebago, Stevenson, and Ogle counties.
Good God.
It's our biggest geography. Lake County was so impressed by how often does Chicago look at us here in Rockford and say, we like what they're doing. We want to be part of them, right? That was really, really cool that Lake County was like, we're hitching our wagon onto Rockford. Eric, at this point, we're very good partners with South Suburban Cook County. That would be the other one. But on population served, on land area covered, we're running the largest land bank in Illinois. And Eric has built that from the ground up. It is a coalition of the willing. If you want to be part of the land bank, you join it. And in Winnebago County alone, in the last 4 years, Eric has put 1,400 new homes back into private sector hands. That were not paying property taxes, that were abandoned for the most part, wouldn't sell at tax sale, blighting neighborhoods, boards on windows. And that's something I'm also very proud of. And that is...
what number was that again?
1,400.
Over 4 years?
For 4.5 years, yeah.
4.5 years. That's remarkable.
Yeah, and you look at, we get the knock for having high property taxes here. The EAV, the equalized assessed value that we've created, not by sprawl or building new subdivisions, which I believe we need. First of all, when it comes to housing, we need as many units as we possibly can get to get that population back to our community. I do think the housing shortage, as much as our market's been healthy for sellers, the housing shortage here is one of the biggest economic development barriers. And when I look at what Eric has been able to accomplish, as far as these are homes that already have the street built, already has the sidewalk built, your utilities already there, the bus route's already there, to be able to bring those homes back online, get new residents in them, infill our neighborhoods. But then by doing so, you have a comp, right? You have an actual fair market value transaction where now an appraiser can come in the neighborhood and point to that home that the land bank did and say, that's a comp, and give other people higher valuations, right?
Right.
Where everybody's property values go up, and it helps offset any levy that, you know, we have to pay property taxes to. So that's the one program that even our transportation planners really want to get involved in, and internally want to be a part of project teams, because as we were talking about how much implementation can you do in regional planning, at least for neighborhood revitalization, we can implement, right? We can go in and actually, you know, look at a piece of land and say, you know what, that should go to the Rockford Park District if they want it. Or, you know what, the Public Works Department needs that land for right of way, so we're not going to rebuild it. We're going to do that for an expansion. It allows us to kind of clean out the cobwebs on all this government surplus property and get it into productive use one way or the other. And 9 times out of 10, we're collecting property taxes on it after it hasn't seen, you know, a taxes paid for a decade. And so, yeah, the mental health work that Jason's doing, the land bank work that Eric's doing, all really equal to, you know, the traditional economic development and transportation work we're expected to do.
Well, that's amazing, quite frankly, really.
Three things about Rockford.
Yeah.
So it's tough. A lot of my favorite restaurants are gone.
Yeah,
When you say pick a restaurant, I do like, easy answer. I do like Abreu. I think Abreu's phenomenal.
Right.
Like Abreu, I like Greenfire, right?
Right.
So I sold my house I had for 17 years, raised my kids in, and I got an apartment downtown, and I downsized, and that gave me kind of a new lease on life as far as how I view the city and how I feel about living in the city, and how I value the good and the bad. And clearly I'm valuing the good a lot more than I was. I think after 17 years in a very, you know, great for a lot of people, great for us to raise my
Suburban,
4 kids,
right?
But it's a suburban environment. To just mix it up a little bit, as my kids have aged out, I have come to be, you know, have a couple boats on the river and goof around on the river. So I would say very new to me. I was probably last to the party. I'd never understood it till I did it. But I think being able to go on the Sinisippi Park District path, be able to have a boat on the river, to bounce around like that has gotten me to discover my hometown in ways that I never knew and really enjoy it. I do like a few of the restaurants, as I mentioned. And, you know, I really am starting to value, I'm seeing a lot of unfamiliar faces, right?
Well,
there seems to be new energy out there where maybe 15 years ago I would go out to a restaurant or somewhere and I know all these people. And even City Market a couple weeks ago, like, I didn't recognize, maybe I'm just too much of a hermit now, but I was like, I don't recognize anyone. And this is cool, right? This is fresh. It feels good. So, yeah, I just think we have welcomed a lot of new people into our community. I think that brings the kind of next level of thought leadership, right? New ideas, new ways to be entrepreneurial, new ways to approach these neighborhoods and what are the values in these neighborhoods. I'm getting a kick out of that. I still think I'm the young Gen X kid who is waiting for the baby boomers to all go away.
Yeah.
And then I'm realizing that, oh my God, I'm the
You're
guy.
next in line.
Yeah, that there's a lot of people my daughter's age that want me to get out of the way. Right? And so, yeah, I'm enjoying the river. I'm enjoying living on the west side of Rockford, quasi-west side, on the west side of the river. I'm enjoying a few of these restaurants, but definitely shout out to Paul and what he's doing with Abreu and social and all that.
Yeah, good. Excellent. Well, Michael, we thank you a lot for taking the time to be with us. For all those who are listening, please check out r1planning.org. Find out all the things they're doing. It's a very broad-based organization now with its hands in a lot of things. And want to encourage you to check it out. Check out the website.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you for letting me brag about the agency. So.
Okay, great.
Yep, we'll see you.
Goodbye.